Right, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us. And on behalf of our fellow Scots out there, happy St Andrew's Day to one and all. It's great to be here, and it's a real privilege to be hosting this. My name's Rob Thompson, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to the next hour and hearing all about urban design and the film and television industry. And I think there's a couple of things that are really interesting, and I know that Bruce and Lucy will touch on this, but there's such a long legacy in the UK for the film and TV industry that with Ealing and here am I showing my age, but Ealing and Nettlefold and Shepperton and Pinewood and all the rest of it, and it's so fantastic to see a new film studios being developed, and so that's really thrilling. And I think the other thing is that on part of the whole thing about film and TV is it's such a visual and creative industry, and it seems really perverse in a way that they're housed in such drab locations. All the magic happens inside a shed, and it's like being stuck on an industrial estate. Although I suspect they have better catering than a Rumble Tums van that runs around and beeps its horn at 12 o'clock, so everyone has to madly run out and get what's left of the sandwiches and the coffee. So it's really thrilling to kind of hear about how they're developing something in a new way, in a kind of like, well, why hasn't this been done before? So I'm really looking forward to the next hour, and I'm really delighted to have Bruce Calton and Lucy Fineberg from Scott Brownrigg here, who will do a much better job of introducing themselves in a little bit more detail. So without me jabbering on, I think we've got an hour. I think it's going to be about a 40-minute presentation, and so there should be I think about 20 minutes to have questions at the end. And I was going to say something drab like over to you, but I think what I should say is quiet on set, lights, camera, action.
Action, yes. Well, thank you very much, Rob, and thank you to Design Group for allowing us to come over today and talk about a new breed of campus film studios and the approach that we have taken in a very unique, interesting and fun site. So today I'll introduce Lucy Fineberg, my senior urban designer, and myself, Bruce Calton, head of master planning at Scott Brownrigg, and we're going to give you a little bit of insight into the film and television industry and what it does across the globe, a little bit of history in the UK in terms of the where did film come from and where has it generally been based in the UK, a bit of history about the site and how we trace through research the history of a site and what has happened in the past to what it informs in the future, and then show you how we've applied our research department work into analysing film studios to see how we've adapted it to the site. Now, looking at the UK film and TV industry, it really is one of the backbones to the art and cultural heritage of the UK, contributing an enormous amount globally, and this is helping to set the scene. In 2019, $177 billion was spent producing films across the globe. Of that generated in excess of $414 billion worth of total revenue from that screen production, and that's an enormous amount. And what that needs is a huge full-time employed workforce of over 14 million people that are employed globally to serve this particular sector. Bringing it to the UK and domestically, pre-COVID, £1.3 billion was generated by film production just in London alone. Now, obviously, pandemic put us all at home in lockdown, and we all jumped onto Netflix and watched series after series. And then 2021 and onwards, that revenue jumped to £5.6 billion. So you can see that it's an enormous part of our economy, employs significant amount of people, nearly 50,000 people in London alone. So where did it all start? The history within the UK really is embodied by Pinewood Studios. In 1936, the Manor building in the estate that was situated in West London, close to the Heathrow Airport, close to the A40 into central London, a TV and studio corridor of expertise. It grew up and it built up on some fantastically accessible land. It's linked with Shepperton Studios, and also the Pinewood brand expands across the globe to Toronto in Canada, where there is a huge film and TV growth in the same way as it is in the UK, and into other parts of America, opening up large audiences. And anybody who's been around the site has seen that it's part of the James Bond experience. The 007 stages are legendary. It's got one of the largest water tank film stages in the world, and that's where the submarines for the James Bond films were filmed within. And it's at Christmas last year, it received consent for a £500 million expansion, showing that the film and TV industry is a growth sector at the moment, and that's really because America is losing a little bit of its revenue, and it's going predominantly both to Canada and the UK, where stars are wanting to come across to Britain and be part of filming in the UK. Our discussion today is about how you go about master planning these. And in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see that Pinewood Studios grew from a series of sporadic shed studios, workshops placed relatively in a functional way that was just about growth, adding on a studio because they needed the space. Whereas we're hopefully today showing how to take that apart and re-look at how to design a new studio. Elstree is a different type of product. It is a very urban or suburban location split over a series of sites. It requires a duplication of security, access, movement, parking, staff facilities, even though it's superbly successful, dating back to 1926. It is split by its location in a suburban West London location. And so places like Leavesden Studios up in Watford, originally a fantastic wartime aircraft factory, repurposed, as they say, to today's dream factory, taken over by Warner Brothers. It has a sister connection in Soho, London, for post-production units. And most people who have been to this particular film studio set is the home of Harry Potter from 2000 to 2010, and has some major stages built for visitor experience. Again, something interesting to think about when designing new film studios. A busy slide here. On the left-hand side, our most notable British film studios are listed. It's trying to keep track of what does exist and what is proposed to be built across the UK. Now, we have to say that the film and TV industry is a relatively secretive at the very early design stages. No one wants to let people know. So the list on the right is what we know in the public domain as new studios. There are many NDAs in place which are about other film studios coming forward, being designed, and that's really where we, Scott Brownrigg, have enjoyed the past 2 or 3 years where we have captured part of this sector boom and buoyancy. We need in the UK to build 2.3 million square feet of stages in the next 3 to 5 years. That is what the agents in the industry have assessed is the capacity that we need to capture. So the moment is absolutely perfect to be looking at sites, bringing them forward. And we've been lucky enough to work pre the Sunset Studios planning permission up in Waltham Cross, a fantastic site on the north part of the M25. We're currently working still on Longcross on the M3, where Netflix have a large facility, and we get called in to look at creative cities such as the American Air Force Base in Upper Hayford, just up north of Oxford, to create a new creative city of film and media. We're delivering Shinfield on the M4 on land owned by University of Reading, and that's interesting because the university have changed their course to give the industry graduates who can just come from the university into this facility, which is about 1 million square feet. And today we'll talk about HOP Bedford. So where do we start? Now, when we first went to site, this was the first photograph that we were presented with, which is a remarkable flat site just outside to the southwest of Bedford town. It's part of the past industry that scarred a lot of the landscape in the area, because London clay was found, and our site is a former clay pit that extends 20 meters down into the ground across this whole site. And what's interesting is, and for us, Lucy and I and our master planning team, is to unravel history and understand how the sites came to be and what preceded our design input. And this was part of the Stuart B Brickworks in Bedford. In 1936, it was the largest brickworks in the world, producing over 500 million bricks a year from the site, the clay and the surrounding area, the clay pits, coming to a brickworks that Stuart B built and employed 2,000 skilled people at that time. Today, it is a 143-acre contained site that has been filled with rainwater. It's not served by any river courses, and over the past 10-15 years, it's slowly filled up to about 6 meters deep of water, and reeds have grown in the surrounding areas, but the land sits 14 to 15 meters deep below the surrounding agricultural and residential communities that are coming forward. You can see Bedford in the far left of the image, and interestingly, 1.5 miles away to the right, Cardington Studios, a former World War II blimp aircraft hangar. 2 hangars there have been converted to film and TV. And as we've got into the project, it's emerged there is a real population dedicated to serving the film and TV industry within Bedford themselves. And they've produced some remarkable global films you wouldn't know that had come from the Bedford environment. So before we unravel the onion skin of history around the site, this helps to illustrate how the site in the middle of the screen in red sits within Bedford's growth strategy. It's a southwest linear corridor following the railway lines, where Bedford have seen to develop a large amount of residential districts. Right next to our site, we have Wixham's, which is coming forward in their latter phases, delivering 4,500 homes. Millview, that sits right on the edge of our site, has just been submitted for planning with a country park and 650 homes. Within Stuartby itself, they've seen remarkable expansion of 1,000 homes in the village, and then the brickwork site will come forward as a further 1,000 homes, and Marston Vale, bookended by Millbrook Testing Ground and Cranfield University, is a further 5,000 homes. So we're lucky we're putting a high-skilled employment zone right in the middle of extensive new and existing residential, which supports our sustainable approach to connecting to these communities, connecting to the wider employment corridors to serve this particular site. So I'll pass over to Lucy to take us through our unravelling of history.
Thank you. As Bruce has so well put, the way the site has developed, how much it has changed, that extends to the local village and how that has developed and is continuing to develop. The site was originally founded as Wootton Pillage, and which literally means Leola's people, and was founded in 1287. And then until 1846, it was a small hamlet of farms and cottages. And in that year, a railway was introduced, which dissected the village and basically increased the area's economic sphere of influence, and was the trigger for change. Following this, the Midland Railway Company built a second railway to the east of the village. And as Bruce has already explained about the clay extraction, at the end of the 19th century, the flat plains of Wootton Pillage were identified as one of the largest Oxford clay exposures in the country. And this clay was used to produce flattened bricks. And in 1897, brick revolution and a large increase in brick production took place, and massive changes in construction. In 1901, the Wootton Pillage Brick Company was founded. And following this, in 1920, the London Brick Company and Wootton Pillage Brick Company merged. Again, following this, a lot of change happened very, very quickly. In 1926, the Garden Village proposals for the village were submitted by the architect F.W.W. Walker. The village is renamed Stuartby after Sir Halley Stuart, who was the owner of Wootton Pillage Brick Company. So it's very interesting how even the place is rooted in what is happening there. Churchill Close completed, and memorial for the villagers who lost their lives in First World War was built in 1928 to 29. Further development within the town or village was completed, and by 1936, as Bruce had already said, it was the largest brickworks in the world, employing 2,000 people and producing 500 million bricks per year, which it's just an unprecedented scale for that time. And following this, as you can see in the imagery, there's the just more and more clay pits are opening up, and as the demand is and the supply is increasing. But with this, they built in 1955, the Sir Malcolm Trust homes were built to built to house the retired brick workers. In 1964, they built a school, so they're developing the village constantly. And in 1970, the Pillage clay pit is transformed into a water body. So they stop extracting the clay, and it's now part of the Marston Vale Country Park. So it's going through a process of progression into different conditions. Further development, so the Meadows housing estate and industry on Broadmead Road are built, and in 2008 the brickworks closed due to being unable to lower the sulfur dioxide emissions. And what we see is clear extraction pits have turned into lakes, and now we start to see further development, residential development start to be developed. And the latest is what we are starting to implement, which is the film and television studio campus. And what's interesting is how the scale, the nature, the industry is relating to that original Stuart B character, and it forms that cornerstone for the surrounding developments and skilled employment for future residents of the local area.
Excellent, well done. And I think it's really interesting, the philanthropic approach that Stuart B did in terms of looking after his workforce, looking after them once they'd retired. He built the churches, the stores, the schools, the senior living enclave within their Stuart B itself. It's really nice, and when you drive through it, it has that. It's not quite Bourneville up in Birmingham, but it's got that feeling that somebody looked after the brick, and it is of its geology, because the brick that came out of the ground is what they built the whole of the village with. So it's really fascinating unraveling that history and looking forward. So that was then, and here is the future. So I'm going to start with a very busy page now. When our client, who is Verb, part of the Yonder Group, and Quartermaster Entertainment Industries, who are the operators of the film studio, approached us, rather than just diving in and drawing and thinking that we could design a film studio from scratch, we stopped and we looked at all of the existing film studios that had been built and all of the current contemporary studios that are going through the planning applications and with planning permissions, to try to decipher what is the core ingredients that make, if you had a clean sheet of paper, a highly functional film studio with all of the supporting infrastructure that you would need. So if you're building in the middle of a desert, what would you provide so that you could operate this particular sector? And what we did was the research team looked at all of the information and collated a document. This is a page from the document of what the core ingredients of film studios should rely on. Up in the top left, it's the ideal mix and link to support infrastructure. Within 10 minutes of going live on our emails, the University of Bedford contacted Quartermaster to say that they really were delighted to hear a film studio was occurring within Bedford itself. It means that the students leaving the university don't travel to London to go to Pinewoods or into central London film studios. They have a facility that they can come to and work at on their doorstep. So the links, film studios with links with colleges and universities, and now at HOP schools as well, is vital. What we find is missing in some of the studios is hotel or accommodation for staff. A lot of the poor press that you read about film studios is workshops where staff work very, very long hours and perhaps leave late at night or early morning, very tired. Accidents are happening. So our client has taken the view that we provide accommodation on site for people that, should they wish to stay, they can do, because the health and well-being aspects of this film studio has been ingrained in the design from day one. We wanted to do things differently from the more ad hoc older film studios and provide facilities that you don't find universally elsewhere. We also have to think about the visitors and the local community. We have to say we have been really surprised and really delighted that we've had 89% positive public consultation support, writing to the council or writing onto the website saying that they're delighted to see this high-skilled employment space occur within such a large area of residential. Mostly they were citing there's nothing much else to do, so this was something of real interest that the community could engage with. So we've looked at including visitor experience within the site, and within the businesses there are lots of support facilities that actually get built to support the economy and the function of a film studio. Medical centres, data centres, light industry serving film industry, providing materials and support will happen in the surrounding areas. And the community themselves, how do we connect with them? Can we provide things that enhance their life? We're providing a new electric bus service connecting the 4 railway stations together through our site, so that it's both sustainable, electric, covered, and connected to the communities. Hopefully we can then have people coming from their homes via electric bus to the site. And we also, at Scott Brownrigg, we really stand for wanting to drive a sustainable agenda across these sites. So how do we design it that we can produce 50% of the energy from solar PV panels across the buildings? They're connected to every building having a battery storage and air source heat pumps, so that we can, of the 12 megawatts of power that we require to run the film studios, 6 megawatts is provided on site, which is a pretty good target for this site. And we also want to look at how we recycle materials on site rather than it going to landfill or being burnt. We want to be able to help recycle across the site. Now, the design is highly functional. This and the master plan has been sent to the Americans, where they've commented they just can't do this type of approach. This has been seen as radical and an ideal that they would love to do. But with unions look to have all the workshops in one location 5 kilometers away from all the stages, which might be downtown, and therefore there's huge transport costs moving sets from one side to another. We've looked at combining all of that into a very functional layout applied to the particular site. So how did we go about doing that? What's really interesting is, you walk on site and you've seen the photograph of this water body within the reed bed environment. As Lucy explained, if you go back in history and unravel what happens on site, the right-hand image shows the original farm, Brook Farm, sitting in the middle of the site. And its field boundaries. That gave us the point where we felt that it gave us the centre of activity. It looks back at history of where activity on the farmland used to occur, and could that influence our thoughts on the design. So we applied the design principle to the site, and then started to look at the technical aspects. We have to fill the middle of the site. The reason why we chose it, not just because of historical links to Brook Farm, but also it was the most shallowest and connected piece across the water body. We can take the soil from the site to make a platform level within it, but we do have a legal responsibility to maintain the water level of the northern lake at the top of the page, because that isn't owned by our client. So that is set at 26 AOD, and we're not allowed to let that fluctuate. We have to absorb it through what began as a very technical and functional drainage ditch which connected two lakes together to drain the water back into our water body if the third party one went to rose or fell. What's interesting is that pure drainage technical ditch has now evolved into something very, very unique for the site. Again, unraveling history, there were two access points off of the main road into the site. That gave us a point of creating a node access and entrance to the site, connecting to the Brook Farms original centerpiece for the site. And we've been very keen that since the client purchased the site in 2016, part of it has been designated a country wildlife site. So we have to be super sensitive about how we address the site. Most of the 143 acres we're not going to be touching. We're not touching the lakes and the major reed beds. We're filling in the central part of that water body to create a platform. And we're looking at how we enhance reed beds. We're creating 40-metre strips of floating reed bed to create a different ecology within the southern lake, and keeping all development into the area that we're creating an urban grain of buildings on a grid and functional level. And those allow us to have a phased approach where we have 4 production units. So you could have Netflix or Disney working on site, filming at any one time with 4 production areas, whereas most of them are quite secretive and fenced off. With the use of the watercourse running through the site, this becomes, in the later pictures I'll show, a real valuable spine and a bioswale, which is uniting the production units and the staff and the visitors all together. And it creates quite a formal avenue through the site, connecting with a VIP building that is the only building that we sit out into the lake, so that people can experience the lakeside setting, the uniqueness of this buried film studios 15 meters down into the to the valley base, and relatively hidden from the surrounding areas. So taking our design guide, what we did originally on the left-hand drawing was create an outer perimeter for all the vehicles that come to site that serve a film studio. There's a lot of HGVs and rigid vehicles full of scene sets, costumes, paint equipment, props, lighting, and it needs to come into the site, but not in our view, conflict with staff and internal movement. So we created an outer loop road that serves the 4 quarters, and stopping points on that outer loop road then allows goods to be taken off and put into a perimeter of workshops shown on the right hand diagram. Placing those ones on an outer edge almost creates a defensible boundary around the inner part of the site. We have to obviously create a network of internal streets, and they have dual function, not just for vehicles or material movement, but also you can line those streets with green screens, and you can suddenly transform a street into a Venice waterway through the magic of the film and TV industry. So we've been very careful to allow streets to be multifunctional, not just traffic and pedestrians. And in the way that we've considered the site, on the right hand diagram, we've concentrated the tall single mass studios, which are about 24 meters tall, 75 meters long, 40 meters wide, into the center of the site. The green ones are specialist stages such as virtual stages or water stages. The purple ones are generally about 40,000 square foot stages split into 2, because that's what the UK market require. And so there's quite a hierarchy to the design: outer loop road, perimeter workshops, inner cluster of stages, but then using the connecting water feature, looking at how we create a bioswale with a multifunctional external use that supports the health and well-being of the site, something which isn't being developed in existing film studios. And we also have to have support facilities, the accommodation, the backlots, stage supports, admin offices that we've placed just outside of that functional centerpiece. And the community on the left-hand side are provided with the transport hub and a healthcare block. So on the first floor is health, ground floor, an enclosed real-time transport connection, which connects to electric bikes, electric car charging, as well as the electric buses that then connect out to the railway stations in the wider community. And thinking about trying to create a connection for the trim trails within the site and within the landscape of the site itself, connecting with the country wildlife sites that are being provided by the residential schemes of Millview alongside us, so that we're looking to allow the staff and the workforce to be able to access better health and well-being facilities than we would normally see. We bring that all together at a design freeze that we started the project in October. By December, we needed to be to a design frozen layout to be able to then move from January through to just about 6 weeks ago when we submitted for planning. And we did it by doing some initial early sketches to try to convey to our client and the community the scale of this, and the fact that actually it's very sensitive. In the backdrop of the image here, on the left, there are some very large logistics and distribution buildings that are white and grey, and they stand out in the flat landscape of Bedford quite significantly, whereas we are sitting down 14-15 meters into the site below the surrounding tree line. And we started to initially look at what the bioswale could be, try to move it from a very technical ditch, as it was called, into something which is really creative in the centre. And then Lucy's work in envisioning the illustration of the master plan and how it sits within the site and how it builds up from the main entrance through to the loop road. We've kept very true to the original design work that we did with the research at the beginning. And the central bioswale has become a fantastic feature that everybody has bought into, the council, the community, the client and the team. It includes restaurants, cafes. It now includes internal gyms, external sports, recreation, farmers markets. It's allowing for the famous silver Airstream caravans to sit alongside the bioswale, so the stars who come to site can stay in the Airstreams and then step out into this bioswale corridor that connects the north to south lake. We wanted to make sure visually we could connect both ends of the site together, and the feature of the VIP cinema that has indoor and outdoor cinema, bar and restaurant sitting on the lake becomes the gem at the end of this internal vista. And to help convey this to the community, we did a series of high-level sections just to help them visualize these mass of stages and workshops sitting within the basin. The railway to the left is at 40, our platform level is at around 30, and the roads to the right are at 37, but the tree boundaries are 15 meters tall. So we know from the LVIA work that we did at the beginning that you won't see the development from the surrounding agricultural and arable fields. It's amazing because they are big buildings at 24 meters tall for the major stages, that they can be so light touch in the context of the surrounding area. We have to prove everything works. In terms of the top left, the external bus comes to the front of the site. They are secure sites. You have to go through a careful controlled system so that the general public can't just wander into the film sets. But then when you get off your electric bus, there's an electric shuttle bus, electric bike, electric scooters at the front door of this site, because the site is 500 meters wide. It's, you know, in total it's a 3-kilometer circuit around the site. So you have to think about how people move across such a large area. So an internal bus and electric movement has been allowed for. But we also have to be very inclusive of our design. We recognise that whilst we provide 1,000 cars to the multi-storey car park, those that are ambulant disabled need to be able to park next to their place of work. The workshops and the stages all provide disabled parking and secure cycle parking to every single building. And then functionally, the bottom right hand image is how we deal with the vehicle, the service vehicle movements. Every stage needs 2 access elephant doors, one on the short side, one on the long side, served by rigid vehicles or HGV. So technically, as master planners, we've worked really hard to create a grid and a framework that is very different to what you'll get in certain other new film studios. We've very carefully had to think about how vehicles move so they don't conflict with people, and we've had to have long discussions with the client about providing more space, more elbow room within the film studio than you would see in other new film studios, which are quite a lot tighter and rely on T-junction turning heads rather than the banjo turning heads, which are a lot safer and more maneuverable within the site. So we're very pleased we've pushed the boundaries of looking after the staff in these areas by providing safe and wide corridors. And we have to show functionally how it all works sustainably. We create all the buildings have 50% PV panels across all the surface of every building. The remaining 50% is green or brown roofs. That helps capture the rainwater. The rainwater is then captured into large tanks in the ground. That helps water the extensive landscaping that we're providing. The hard surfacing between the stages all go to channels. Those all get drained to the bioswale. So there's a lot of water mitigation across the site and water capture for the site. Both are highly functional, but what we believe has set this apart from other sites and other film studios is one which focuses a lot on the health and well-being of the site and of those facilities. So we probably, as we come to the end of this, we've got a short 1.5 minute film that we're going to struggle, but we will try to show. Now, am I showing that? I'm going to share, if you don't mind. I've got to just cancel out and find it. It has. Can you see?
Yes.
Can you see it? Okay. It may play with music. It may not. Can you hear music? You can't. No, sadly not. But I'll take you through across the lake to our VIP building, sitting in the lake with restaurants and bars, through to the bioswale where it terraces down for the staff to actually access and use, something very unique in this industry, to the centre of the site where we have the restaurants, bars, cafes, outdoor play space. We've got basketball courts, table tennis, five-a-side football, a gym, lots and lots of outdoor tented areas where people can sit. Coming in through the entrance, very careful landscaping that allows you to have that open view across the lake and into the production unit. Coming up past on the right to the transport hub and then to the main gates, which is the admin office that controls and operates the whole of the site. at the front door, and then we come through to the back lot. It could be a piece of New York, as it is in this scheme, going through the workshops on the outer perimeter of the master plan, where it's all constructed, painting, costumes, equipment done, then through to one of the large 20,000 square foot stages where they build and film, through to the single surface public realm environment, and then concluding as you step out into the lake to the VIP cinema that is open to the public occasionally throughout the year as a facility for people to come and see previews of films, what have they been shooting during the day. We will show outdoor sports events on the outdoor cinemas and the like. So we have just come up to 45 minutes, and I think that for that just then takes us through to the very last slide. Sorry, I apologize. One of the unique features of the site is that we've got a 1 kilometre of perimeter of workshops. And what we've proposed to the client is this will be the first 1 kilometre graffiti wall around the whole of the site. We're going to engage with universities, colleges and commercial artists to provide fixed graphics which are film and TV inspired, but also panels on the walls which can change. So if Marvel turns up, the base 3 meters of each of the buildings can then change to suit a Marvel graphic or a Marvel imagery, something that the client was so engaged with, he went to Miami to take photographs as shown on the bottom image of what it could look like. And we've also from there taken a very detailed look at how to change the way film studios are designed and how can they be more sustainable as we drive for net zero carbon in any of the developments that we try to do. So we're promoting timber construction for the offices, off-site manufacture for the panels for the stages, looking at ways to capture and heat and cool the buildings. We're saying, because the industry only uses halogen lighting elsewhere, that all the lighting on site will be LED. That dramatically reduces the energy requirement on the site, but also HOP Bedford will burn no fossil fuels in operation at all. So that's something the client has driven as well. So we're really pleased that having been able to evaluate history and look back how film studios were designed, how film studios are currently coming through planning, what would be the things that we would learn. And we've really pushed health and well-being for all staff across the site, creating real public realm that's not seen in the older film studios in the UK, focus on providing a very central cafes, restaurants, gyms and access to Country Park and all around the new bioswale, introducing orchards, farmers markets, increasing the reed bed to help balance the net biodiversity, accommodation to support those on the site who are staying late. It's a functional layout, but it's got fun in it, designed in. All the routes inside can be film sets as well. The client is signing up to looking after and managing the country wildlife site on site for the next 30 years plus. We won't burn fossil fuels on site in operation. We're generating the power from solar and battery source and air source heat pumps for half of the need of the site. We would love to do the whole a lot, and there are a couple of film studios that are proposing 100% PV power serving their sites, and we commend that. We think that's excellent, and we want to increase the social value in the surrounding areas by improving education and employment opportunities. And the client and the team have been calling this best in class, which we're very proud of, that they do think that. So apologize, just ran over by 3 minutes on that, and hope that was fun.
That was fantastic. It really was fun. Thank you, Bruce and Lucy. That was really enjoyable and a great journey through the experience that you've had over the last couple of years, and really interesting. And sort of, I really like that idea of the, as you alluded to, that kind of the philanthropic sort of origins of Stuartby, and how that's sort of tracking forward into the things and the decisions that you're making in terms of the well-being for staff and the accommodation overnight and the giving back.
And what's really interesting, Rob, is that originally Stuartby employed 2,000 skilled workers. This facility will get close to that again. So, 50, 60 years after, the brickworks, we're going to get 1,400, 1,500 people back on site in an area where, they had high employment. So, and the community have recognised that, and they see that as a real plus.
And in with surrounding residential areas as well, so it's not in the middle of nowhere that is unsustainably located.
Yes,
absolutely. It was required for the forthcoming huge residential developments coming forward. It was
and I think it's the reason, when we were talking about it before this presentation, that whole idea of, and I alluded to it at the beginning, that kind of, this is something different. It feels much more like an innovation district that is, and that spine being something that people can enjoy and meet and share thoughts and be inspired, and sort of you get that sort of cross-fertilization of ideas and sort of discussions and things like that. It's not all separate buildings, separate things, everything separated by palisade fencing and all the rest of it.
And I think the nervousness from the council and Bedford have been absolutely fantastic. Was that their initial impression was it's going to be like a big logistics and distribution park with 4 people in there and a load of robots, on packing crates, and it being a very sterile concrete environment. And we've really tried to then create a landscape-led environment. We've worked with McFarlane Associates, who've done a fantastic job reinterpreting what would be normally done on a film studio into something which is a lot more green, a lot more landscape led.
Yeah. Well, and you can say, well, it could be robots. It depends on the film, doesn't it?
True. Yes.
I mean, Guillermo's going to be busy. I notice he's getting loads of text messages from everybody on the film. But I mean, one thing, I mean, you touched on, I mean, if I may ask a question, I don't know whether anyone else who's on the call has questions. But one from me just to start. I mean, you talked about the planning authority and taking people on that journey, and you sort of touched, and I thought it was quite intriguing, the kind of idea of what the unions wanted, and that whole idea of separation, and we want stuff 5 miles away, and there's that all kind of, this is the way we've always done things, and goodness knows we know that in other sort of fields of urban design at the moment. But how did you sort of, I mean, I can't quite work out why they want things 5 miles away, but kind of how did you sort of tackle those ingrained assumptions and demands and sort of take them? I mean, I'm sure the compelling images have been part of it, but have you had any stumbling blocks in that?
I think it's the mentality and the approach in America when you design the film studios is to cluster the uses, and there's a lot of control over that. We're lucky when you have a clean sheet of paper here to do the right thing rather than what is traditionally done and the traditional controls in America. And that's why when the master plan was released, Quartermaster took it to America. They were just going, we just can't do that. We can't do that here, because the unions will want to have control of the workshops over there. And then there's a very specific way of transferring the materials, the sets, the goods to the studios. Whereas here, the land is condensed. It's, we're having to make best use of land, and we recognise we're recovering some of it from the water body. So it's 70 acres of platform that the film studio will sit on, and we just can't be wasteful. But we have pushed the client to be much more generous in the streets, giving us elbow room across it. And the council have been other than their original reticence, because it potentially was like a logistics or distribution, they've bought into it through the consultation and the presentations that we've done, that it's actually a unique environment. It's our client calls it best in class, which we're really proud of. It is setting a new benchmark, and amazingly, most of the film studio sectors, when you put in an application, there is a cachet of having a film studio in your borough or your district. Shinfield in Reading Borough Council were absolutely overjoyed. We'd got consent for a science park on the site, and when we went back to the council and said, well, thank you for that 800,000 square foot consent for science park, we'd like to put 1 million square feet film studio in, it took 10 minutes to go through planning, because it's still highly skilled employment on site in the community, and it has a brand and a cachet that the universities and the local authorities like. And it's the same in Bedford. It's a unique type of facility.
Well, and I can imagine that sort of link to universities and it is so important. And I know Nottingham Trent, in particular, locally, and others, would tie into that as well. And so there's a strong sort of
well, we thought the universities would be the only ones that are interested, but whilst they have a film and TV course, which they will be adapting to address this film studio turning up, what's been really surprising is even at the school age, they've asked our clients, QMS, to come in and talk to them about what a film studio is, so that they can think about how at school, early school level, how they can excite and engage with the children to get them thinking about their future careers.
Brilliant. Well, that's great. Any other questions on the grid? I mean, I suppose the other thing for me is so I don't want to monopolise it, but I'm just thinking about the sort of external perimeter and how you sort of express that, because I suppose there's that thing of it being secure and all your actors not wanting to have sort of the general public sort of just swanning by as they're sort of getting out of their Dreamliner,
Yes.
and catching them at those unguarded moments, but it's trying to make that look. I suppose you've got levels that help with that, and you've got railway lines and things. But can you talk a little bit more about how you've dealt with the boundary?
Yes, well, the railway is elevated. It sits at 40 AOD when our site is at 30. So you've naturally got a consistent line. And this part of Bedford, as you can see from the photograph, is pancake flat. It's not until you get to Flitwick that sits behind, almost behind this image, that when you look out across the landscape, it's flat. And that was a real nervousness, that we're putting in 24-metre tall stages, and would it look out of place? But the fact that we're already 10 to 14 meters down to the platform level, and that the boundaries that have grown up over time are 15 meters tall, we sit 1 meter below the canopy level on all pretty much on all four sides. Now, we do recognize that Stuartby has expanded, and they are still building to this day right up against the railway line. So from the first floor windows, you may capture the parapets of these buildings, but we've had the residents in who are living close by and buying into that, and their words at consultation is, thank goodness it's just not more housing on our doorstep. We want this activity, we want this to be more than just the spread of housing that's materialized in Bedford. So we're lucky that the railway boundary is high and consistent, and we're going to be planting additional landscaping along there. The main road, which is the access road to the right of the image, again, it's four trees deep, 15 meters tall, with an earth bank that's already been placed when it was an operational clay pit. So again, we've got a very structured, strong landscape corridor. And the council did say then why have we got black buildings? Well, the backdrop of dark tree, and we did some evidence based on Shinfield, where when you drive down the M4 and you look into the film studios, you don't see 250,000 square feet of film studios, because the backdrop of dark woodland strip blends with the black of the buildings, and they sit within that landscape and are very visually unobtrusive. They're there, but you don't recognize them, like a logistics building which might be painted or colored bright white or multicolored blue, which does stick out. These have been designed so that they do merge with the backdrop. And then you've got the lakes at both ends. We own the South Lake, which is a major lake, and before you ask, we aren't able to use it to film on, which is a real disappointment. The ecology is so high in there that we've got to preserve the lake just as a water body. And then the Northern Lake is owned by a third party, but it's a great. There is no other film studio that's built with the lakes surrounding them.
I think in addition, at that human scale, and that boundary condition of, is it private? Is it not private? How do you tackle that? As Bruce has said, we've got the two lakes which create great distance. So it's soft boundary through distance, and carefully curated understanding of public and private of that land. On the western boundary with the railway line, it's a quick route. So anybody that gets potentially a look in is they're going at whatever speed on the train. And then the only boundary that was a little more difficult to tackle and we had to think about and curate more carefully was the eastern boundary. But we've used different uses that are less sensitive along that edge, things like the hotel and the multi-story car park, and with the thick woodland depth and strategic boundary treatment with specialized fencing we work with McFarland's on. We've softly basically created that privatized land as it's needed, but not in a way that feels like a 6-foot metal fence. I hope between us we've answered that.
Yeah. No, that's great. I'm conscious of the time because it's coming up. It's over 1:30 now. Oh, there's a question about accommodation on site. Do you want to answer that, and then I'll wrap up if I may? Or,
could you read it out?
How much accommodation do you provide on site? Do you rely on accommodation elsewhere too? From Chris Kennett.
Okay, it's a good question. We are providing 150 bed accommodation because of what we understand in the industry is that the long hours that most people are putting in the workshops, creating the sets before they go into the stages to start filming. And we felt it was absolutely necessary to provide on-site accommodation for those that wanted to stay over if they needed to. But what we see is a support network always occurs on the film campus. The surrounding areas, you find pop-up restaurants, pop-up hotels, other light industry serving this business. So we're not just generating an economy from the site alone. The ripple effect will be much wider and much more of a benefit to the wider community. And accommodation is always something we see spring up on the boundaries or just into the town, serving that workforce of 1,400, 1,500, maybe in a full packed out four production units filming at any one time, potentially back to the old Stuartbury brickworks of 2,000 people.
And it supports sort of regional employment as well, and that was a big part of the proposals, being a part of this huge residential development that's going on around. That that accommodation is essentially being provided for employment in the area, and it becomes a draw for why you would live in this area. So we're quite proud of that as well, and not just the southeast centric kind of location. I wanted to answer the question on the bioswale, and I think it's been answered, but it was really interesting because it was a very big task, and it's something that ends up being a little line on the on the scheme, but actually it was a massive engineering feat to put it in, and McFarlane's did a fantastic job on that. Just to make it clear, a bioswale is essentially an engineered swell with a pipe that runs underneath, so it's a management rather than a naturally occurring depression. So I hope that helps.
Okay, great, thank you. Well, I think that's been really interesting and informative, and just such a fantastic journey. I've got loads more questions, but they'll have to wait. I'll have to wait for another time, I think. But thank you so much for your time. I hope everyone on the call has enjoyed it. I certainly have. It's been great to hear the journey, and look forward to seeing it on its next steps. And it's amazing how you've held on to the diagram. It'd be lovely to see the master plan with that beautiful sort of contextual diagram overlaid on the top, but you've held on to that through the process. I know there's loads more steps to go, but it'll be interesting to keep a watch on how this progresses. So I'll be interested to hear more.
A pleasure. Yeah, very good.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you. Thanks everyone. Bye bye now.
Thank you.